The Unbreakable Vow. The ghost of the Verrazzano. Lorenzo the Ghost Moretti was a rumor-given flesh. He commanded New York's underworld not with bombast, but with a silence so profound it felt like a physical pressure. His enemies didn't hear the bullet that killed them. They heard the echo of his decision, whispered days earlier in his soundproof pentafice overlooking the Verrazzano Bridge. He was a man of ice, his heart encased in permafrost, his emotions locked away as securely as the ledges detailing his empire. He believed in loyalty, territory, and the cold calculus of power. He did not believe in love. Love was a vulnerability, a structural flaw, a crack through which a rival could drive a wedge and bring everything crashing down. His right hand, his underboss and cousin, was Matteo, where Lorenzo was ice. Matteo was controlled fire, charismatic, sharp-tongued, fiercely protective. And it was Matteo who, on a rain-lashed Tuesday, brought the problem into the sanctum of their social club, the Empyrean. "We have a situation, Lo," Matteo said, his usual smirk absent. He nodded toward the door. Two of their soldiers entered, guiding a young man between them. He was maybe 20, dripping wet, the split lip and terror in his eyes. Behind them, dragged in by a third soldier, was a woman. Her name was Chiara. She was the boy's sister. And from the moment she crossed the threshold, the atmosphere in the room changed. She wasn't beautiful in a conventional way. She was a storm contained in a slight frame. Her dark hair was plastered to her head by the rain, her clothes simple and soaked. But her eyes, Lorenzo felt a jolt, as if he'd touched a live wire. They were the color of aged whiskey, flecked with gold, and they burned not with fear, but with a defiant, furious despair. She shook off the soldier's hand as if his touch were acid. "What is this?" Lorenzo asked, his voice a low vibration in the quiet room. He didn't look at the boy. He looked at her. "Little Tony here," Matteo said, slapping the terrified boy on the back. "Thought he could skim from the Diamond Bay numbers. A modest sum, but the principle, you understand." The boy, Tony, began to sob. "I'm sorry, Mr. Moretti. It was for my mom's surgery, I swear. I'll pay it back triple." Lorenzo's gaze remained on Chiara. He saw her jaw tighten, saw her fists clench at her sides. She stepped forward, putting herself between the soldiers and her brother. "He made a mistake," she said. Her voice was lower than he expected, clear as a bell despite a slight tremor. "A stupid, desperate mistake. He's a kid. Take the money from me. I'll work it off." A few of the men in the room chuckled. Matteo raised an eyebrow, looking at Lorenzo with an asterisk believe this asterisk expression. Lorenzo finally shifted his gaze to Tony. "The penalty for theft is not repayment. It is an example." His words were final, a death sentence. It was then that Chiara did the unthinkable. She took another step forward, right up to the massive oak desk that separated her from Lorenzo. She placed her palms flat on the polished surface, leaning in. The room gasped. No one got that close to the ghost. "Then make an example of me," she whispered, the words carrying in the stunned silence. Her golden eyes locked onto his steel-grey ones. "My life for his. You have the power. Show your mercy, not just your strength." For a full minute, no one breathed. Lorenzo stared at this fierce, drowning sparrow who had flown into his cage and challenged the hawk. He saw no calculation in her eyes, only a raw, sacrificial love so profound it was alien to him. It was a strength of a different kind, one that didn't come from a gun or a threat, but from the very heart she was offering to stop. "Get him out of the city," Lorenzo said, his eyes never leaving Chiara's. "Send him to the crew in Miami. He works there, under supervision, until the debt is paid tenfold." He paused, the next words altering the course of his destiny. "She stays. The cage of gilded roses. Chiara's employment was a fiction." Lorenzo installed her in a luxurious, top-floor apartment in a building he owned, with a view of the bridge that was his kingdom's symbol. It wasn't a prison. It was a gilded cage. She had everything: clothes, food, a stocked library, a piano she didn't know how to play. Everything except her freedom. A discreet but constant guard was posted outside her door. Lorenzo told himself it was about control, about ensuring her brother's compliance, about owning the debt in its most intriguing form. He did not visit for a week, but he thought of her. The memory of her defiant, desperate eyes haunted the edges of his ledgers and the silence of his penthouse. When he finally came, it was late. She was on the sofa, curled with a book, wearing one of the simple silk robes he'd provided. She looked up, and the fear was there now, a shadow in the gold. "Are you here to kill me?" she asked, her voice steady. "No," he said. He remained standing, a dark pillar in the softly lit room. "I'm here to understand you. There's nothing to understand. I love my brother. Love is not a currency," he stated. "It's the only currency that matters," she fired back. Thus began their strange, tense dance. He would visit, always unannounced. He never touched her. He asked questions about her life as a music teacher, about her mother's illness, about her father who had walked out years ago. She answered with guarded honesty, her spirit neither broken nor cowed. She, in turn, began to ask questions of him, not about his business, but about him. Why the silence? What did he see from his window all day? Did he ever listen to the music that played softly in the elevators of his buildings? One evening he found her at the grand piano, picking out a single hesitant, mournful note with one finger. The sound echoed in the spacious room, a perfect echo of the loneliness he saw in her posture. "You don't play," he observed. "I feel it," she said softly, not turning. "The music, I can't make it come out." He understood that more than he could say. He walked over, standing beside the piano. For the first time he reached out. Not to grab, not to claim. He gently took her hand, lifting her finger from the key. Her skin was warm, soft. A current, shocking in its intensity, shot up his arm. He felt her tremble. "Some songs," he said, his voice rougher than intended, "are felt in the silence between the notes." She looked up at him then, and the defiance was gone, replaced by a profound, searching confusion. He saw his own reflection, fractured and uncertain, in her whiskey-colored eyes. He released her hand as if burned, and left without another word. The change was glacial and undeniable. Lorenzo started having dinner sent up for two. Their conversations moved from interrogations to debates about books, about a painting on the wall, about the meaning of loyalty. He discovered she had a wit as sharp as Matteo's, but laced with a compassion his cousin lacked. She made him think. She made him feel. And it was terrifying. Matteo saw it. "Lorenzo," he warned one night in the back room of the Empyrean, "this is a weakness. She's a hostage. A bargaining chip. Not a distraction. She is under my protection," Lorenzo corrected, his tone leaving no room for discussion. The word protection had taken on a new, sacred meaning. The crisis that forced the thaw came from outside. A rival family, the Volkovs, Russian and brutal, made a move on a Moretti-controlled dockyard. In the ensuing violence, one of Lorenzo's captains was captured. The Volkovs' message was clear. A trade. The captain for the ghost's little songbird. They had heard rumors of the woman in the tower. Rage, cold and purer than any he'd ever known, filled Lorenzo. It wasn't just a challenge to his authority. It was a threat to her. To Chiara. He planned a retaliatory strike of devastating precision. It was to be a message written in blood. He went to her apartment to tell her she would be moved to a safer location. He found her standing at the window, watching the bridge lights shimmer on the water. She turned as he entered, and he saw she'd been crying. "You're going to war for me," she stated. "It wasn't a question." "For what is mine?" he replied, the old language of possession feeling hollow on his tongue. "No," she said, walking towards him. She stopped a foot away, well within the distance he usually kept from everyone. "Don't do it. Not for me. More men will die. More brothers will have sisters pleading for their lives. It's the way of my world," he said, his jaw tight. "Then change your world," she cried, her composure breaking. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "You have all this power. Use it to build something, not just to destroy. I see it in you, Lorenzo. I see the man trapped in the ghost. The man who feels the music between the notes, her use of his name, her tears for the violence he took as a birthright. It shattered the last of his defenses." With a groan that came from the depths of his frozen soul, he closed the distance between them. He didn't kiss her. He framed her face with his hands, his thumbs catching her tears. He rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling. "Chiara," he breathed, her name a prayer, a confession, a surrender. "You have undone me, completely." When his lips finally found hers, it was not an act of conquest, but of worship. It was slow, deep, and devastatingly tender, a silent vow against the violence waiting outside. She melted into him, her hands coming up to clutch the lapels of his coat, her response a promise of her own. In that kiss, the Mafia boss and the hostage vanished. There was only Lorenzo and Kaya, two lost souls finding their way home in each other. He called off the bloodbath. Instead, he orchestrated a breathtakingly cunning maneuver, bankrupting the Volkovs' front businesses, and having their leadership deported on old warrants. The message was even clearer. "Touch what is mine, and I will erase you without getting a drop of blood on my hands." Her hands. The unbreakable vow. She was no longer a prisoner. She was his sanctuary. He brought her to his penthouse, the inner sanctum no one else entered. He shared his silence with her, and she filled it not with noise, but with a presence that was like sunlight warming a cold stone. He taught her to play chess. She taught him to hear the melody in the city's hum. The night he knew he was utterly, irrevocably lost, she was playing the piano. She had been practicing for months. It was a simple, haunting piece by Chopin. She made mistakes, her fingers faltering. But when she finished, she looked at him, her eyes shining. "For you," she said softly. The song between the notes. Lorenzo, the man of unshakable control, felt something break open inside his chest. He crossed the room, went down on one knee before her at the piano bench, taking her hands in his. It was not a position of supplication, but of devotion. "Chiara," he said, his voice thick with an emotion so vast it had no name. "You are my life, my soul. Before you, I was a ghost haunting my own existence. You gave me flesh. You gave me a heart." He pressed a kiss to each of her palms. "Marry me, not as a Mafia boss's wife, but as my partner, my equal, the keeper of all my secrets and all my love. Be my unbreakable vow." Tears of joy streamed down her face as she nodded, whispering yes against his lips as he rose to kiss her. Their wedding was small secret, and held in the chapel of the old neighborhood where his grandfather had started. Only Matteo and a few trusted others were there. As they exchanged rings, Matteo, wiping a surreptitious tear, leaned over and muttered to the priest, "I told you she'd be the death of him." The priest smiled. "Or his salvation, my son." Years later, Lorenzo the Ghost Moretti was still a powerful man. But the nature of his power had changed. He was quieter, more strategic, less violent. He had someone to lose. Chiara, now his wife in every sense, ran a foundation in the neighborhood, a music school for underprivileged kids. She was his light, and he was her unwavering shield. One evening, as they stood on their terrace watching the lights of the Verrazzano Bridge, she leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The fear? The absolute power?" He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her back against his chest, his chin resting on her head. He thought of the cold, silent man he had been, a king of an empty, haunted castle. "I have absolute power," he murmured into her hair, his voice filled with a warmth that was hers alone. "I have the power to make you smile, to keep you safe, to love you until my last breath and beyond. That is the only empire I ever wanted." He turned her in his arms, his grey eyes, once so cold, now soft as morning fog. "You are my territory, Chiara, my most valuable holding, and I will defend you, cherish you, and love you with a fierceness that would make every king and emperor in history bow in envy." And as he kissed her, under the bridge that symbolized his old world, Lorenzo knew the truth. He hadn't fallen in love with a hostage. He had been taken captive by a queen, and in her gilded cage of love, he had found the only freedom that truly mattered.